super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart FarmCast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart FarmCast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. Hope you're doing well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition. Traditional living, traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, and of course, raw milk products and traditional artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. Today, raw milk to ultra-pasteurized milk and everything in between. That is the topic of the day. I'm going to talk about all sorts of milk and milk products, and I'll give a brief definition of each one along with various commentary about development and uses of these nutrient-dense sources of food. But first, I want to welcome each and every new listener. I hope you enjoy this content and share it with your friends and family. And as always, a heartfelt welcome back to the veteran homestead-loving regulars who stop by the FarmCast every episode. I appreciate you all so much. There is no show without you and your input. So we have exciting news happening at the homestead. Are you ready? Let's get to it. We're going to do some homestead life updates. Again, our topic today is from raw milk to ultra-pasteurized milk and everything in between. And our recipe today is going to be Crème Fraîche. All right, the homestead. Well, it seems like we skipped from summer to winter with only a few days of fall in between. I don't know. Maybe it'll be warmer in December. Sometimes it is. When I first moved to Virginia, we experienced winters that had about maybe 5 days of weather that would get down into the 20s at night, and it'd be 40 or something during the day. And then occasionally we might have one night where it would slip into the teens and then just warm right back up the next day. But the past couple of years, we've had some really cold winters with many days in the low teens and even single digits at night, and the highs only in the 20s, and the ponds freezing over and staying frozen. This fall, we have already had nights in the 20s, if you can believe it. And who knows what the winter will hold? Perhaps it will actually be warmer later on in the year. We do have our first scheduled frost is October 15th, or according to the USDA zone map, we are likely to have our first frost by October 15th. But you would just have a little dip down, get a little frost, and then it would warm right back up. We'll see. That didn't happen. So, but we'll see if we get some warmer weather as we get closer to December. All right, let's talk about the cows. Any day now, we will have a new calf. Cloud is showing signs of the last stages. She moves very slowly and with difficulty as the calf has dropped down quite a bit, and her udder's getting larger, so she waddles. Her udder is actually larger than Violet's at this late point in Violet's lactation cycle. Violet's udder was larger at the onset of her lactation way back in April, but she's at the end of her lactation cycle and producing much less milk at this point. So, new calf, any day, any day. The quail. The quail are doing well with the cold. That was great. They just zipped right on through that. Unfortunately, we lost 4 of the 6 new ones that we had to a predator. It happens. There were signs of an animal laying underneath the top cage. There are 2 sets of cages, one on top of the other. And so the bottom set is the breeding groups. There's 3 groups, breeder groups. And then the top cage has 2 sections where we put just grow out birds, replacement birds, and so on. So under that top cage, there's like a slanted board. And that's so it catches the manure, and it's slanted, so it's covered with plastic, and we can just scrape off the manure and replace the plastic as we need it. I don't know. It looks like that plan will have to be modified in some way if predators are going to reach up from underneath and snag the birds. Anyway, the remaining 2 quail we were put in with the main flocks on the lower level, and all of them are doing great, even with the cold. In the lower group, their waste goes straight through the bottom of the cage to the ground, and there is no extra board below them, so there's no way to get up underneath that bottom set of cages. They are well off of the ground, and that was planned for. We just didn't really plan for somebody climbing up underneath there. Anyway, you live and learn. The sheep, the goats, and the donkeys, they are all doing well. I don't remember if I mentioned that we lost a couple of lambs to predators, and the rest are doing fine. The donkeys have been really good at keeping the predators away from the sheep and the lambs. The lambs are actually almost as big as their moms at this point, but they're still vulnerable. I'm not sure what happened there. But anyway, they're all doing well right now, so we'll just go with that. Now, as far as the creamery goes, the inner walls are complete. Or perhaps by the time you listen to this, the inner walls will be complete. And then Scott's going to take a break from all that block work and start back on fencing. The work is never done around the homestead. While fixing fence, he will also be creating firewood, because this is from all those trees that were blown down several months ago onto the fences. We've actually been using standard heating during the unseasonably cold fall weather, but soon we will have wood to use in the wood stove for heating. It will be so warm and toasty in here. For the past week or so, I've been closing myself into the office and running the small heater that I have in there to keep warm, while the rest of the house is about 68 degrees, maybe a little bit less sometimes. And that's really cold for me. Well, it probably wouldn't be so bad if I just surrendered and put some socks on to keep my feet warm. I don't know about you, but when my feet and hands get cold, the rest of me feels like it's freezing and will never be warm again. Anyway, I'm excited about the creamery walls all being up, and I'm so glad Scott's going to get a chance to move on to something else for a little while, and then he'll start working. He's been, on rainy days, been working on the plans for the roof for the creamery, but he's not going to jump right into that right away. There'll be a little bit of break while he cleans up and the fencing to keep the animals safe this winter. All right, enough about that. Let's get on to today's topic. From raw milk to ultra-pasteurized milk and everything in between. So, dairy products have long been favored for their contributions to the human diet, right? Cave paintings made in the Libyan Sahara in 5000 BC show people milking animals and making cheese. 5000 BC. Some research indicates the goats and sheep provided the first dairy products for humans. Later, cows supplied the dairy products for much of the world. Now, before refrigeration was invented, milk spoiled rapidly. However, we humans quickly learned to preserve milk. We made butter, ghee, cheese, and other fermented products. And by the 1st century AD, the Romans were master cheesemakers, even using cheese presses to aid in separating the whey from the curd. So they came a long way with the cheeses. And I did a podcast on that way long ago. I think it's called The History of Cheese. I'll have to look it up and put a link. Over the years, people have experimented with many variations in milk and cheese-making processes. As a result, a great diversity of fermented milk and cheese products are available to us today. And I gave the basics of cheese styles in a previous podcast. In a future podcast, I'll go over more details of some common cheeses that you might find in your local supermarket and what distinguishes them one from another. And I'll include information on our lovely cheeses as well. But you have, just a brief refresher there, you have fresh cheeses, you have washed curd cheeses, you have washed rind cheeses, you have cheddar cheeses, and so on. So, but then within those groups, there are a lot of different cheeses, and I'll talk about those again in a later podcast. So today we're talking about milk. So milk is a dairy product that is valued as a nutritious beverage, and it's an ingredient in cooking, and it's the foundation of other dairy products, including butter, cheese, and yogurt. And the composition of milk varies depending on the type of animal, the breed, the animal's diet, the season, and even the time of day the animal is milked. And unless I mention it specifically otherwise, all of the milk that I'm talking about in this podcast is about cow's milk. I am going to talk a little bit about some other types of milk, but mostly what I'm talking about is cow's milk. So cow's milk from a grocery in the U.S. is composed primarily of water. It's 88% water. It contains about 3.5% milk fat and about 8.5% milk solids in the form of proteins, which is primarily casein. There's lactose, which is the milk sugar, minerals, and vitamins, right? So it's milk fat, milk solids, and the milk solids are the caseins, the proteins, which are caseins, the lactose, which is the milk sugar, the minerals, and the vitamins. And milk provides a rich source of calcium as well as vitamins A, D, E, K, C, and B. Commercial milk is fortified with additional vitamin D. Part of that is due to the pasteurization, which destroys some of it. Let's see. To replace the vitamin A that's drawn off with the removal of milk fat, low-fat and skim milk products are fortified with vitamin A, right? So the vitamin A comes off with the milk fat or the cream. So your low-fat, your skim milks are going to be fortified with vitamin A. All right, so casein, as I said, is the primary protein in milk, and it causes milk to clump and to curdle in the presence of acid, too much salt, or high heat. And so when you're heating milk on the stove, a skin will actually form on the top, and the skin it's actually coagulated protein and fat. Milk can also coagulate and then burn on the bottom of a pan if you're not careful when you're heating it. Continuous stirring, heavy cookware, moderate heat, minimal cook times, that helps limit your coagulation on the bottom. So heat can cause it to coagulate, and the presence of acid and salt, again, we use those in cheese making to make the milk clump up and to curdle. Now let's talk about the milk processing methods that have been developed over time. Milk, like all food products, provides a favorable host for the growth of bacteria, some of which can cause serious illness. And because of this, and almost all milk is treated with some kind of pasteurization to kill bacteria and, more importantly, to increase its shelf life. So pasteurization, in the 1860s, the French chemist Louis Pasteur discovered a way to use heat to prevent spoilage of beer and wine without destroying their flavor. And pasteurization applies the same theory to the treatment of milk. That happened more in the late 19th century, early 20th century, that we really got heavily into pasteurization of milk. And personally, I think pasteurization does actually destroy the flavor of milk. You can see my previous podcast, Benefits of Raw Milk, for more on that. Now, the law requires that all grade A milk be pasteurized. In fact, nearly all milk sold commercially in any of the Western countries is pasteurized. And the most common pasteurization technique heats milk to 161 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds and then rapidly cools the milk to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's for drinking milk. If you were making cheese, some of the cheese vats would just lower it to the proper temperature to make the cheese. But if it's drinking milk, they're going to bring it all the way down to 45 pretty quickly. So the pasteurization, again, is used to kill the bacteria. It extends the keeping qualities of milk by killing naturally occurring enzymes that we want in our raw milk. Anyway, those naturally occurring raw enzymes that cause milk to sour and to ferment. And unlike raw milk, pasteurized milk does not become sour and naturally ferment because it has those enzymes, right? So it can ferment into other products. Pasteurized milk, if it's properly refrigerated, keeps for about a week before it begins to rot and it becomes completely unusable, even for cooking. We use our sour milk for cooking and feeding the animals, but pasteurized milk that is sour, you don't even want to feed that to your animals. It just rots. Now, there's a technique called ultra-pasteurization, and it's often used to extend the shelf life of cream. You see it most often with cream, ultra-pasteurization. And so it subjects the dairy products to a much higher temperature for shorter periods, destroying nearly all bacteria. So if you've got an unopened, refrigerated, ultra-pasteurized milk or cream, it's going to stay fresh for 2 to 3 months in the refrigerator as long as it's unopened. But once it's open, then the product is going to stay fresh as long as, conventionally pasteurized milk products, so about a week after it's opened. Then there's the ultra-high temperature processing, and or UHT. You'll see it referred to as UHT. And it combines the process of ultra-pasteurization with specialized packaging. So you're holding the milk there for 2 to 6 seconds at 280 degrees to 300 degrees to sterilize it. Then it's hermetically sealed in sterile containers to block out bacteria, gases, and light. So unopened UHT milk can safely be stored without refrigeration for up to 3 months. All right, so ultra-pasteurized in the refrigerator up to 3 months. But if it's UHT, it can be stored without refrigeration for up to 3 months. After it's opened, you handle the UHT milk in the same way as conventionally pasteurized milk products. If you're making your own cheese or Crème Fraîche, as I'll talk about later, don't use UHT milk. It has been damaged too badly to be useful in making cheese or yogurt, and so on. Now, homogenization. Untreated milk, raw milk, the fat particles float to the top. You're creating this layer of cream, or what's called the cream line. And this happens because the fat globules, which are lighter than the surrounding water, are too large to stay suspended in the emulsion. To prevent the separation of milk fat, most commercially sold milk is homogenized. Homogenization breaks down fat globules by forcing the warm milk through a very fine nozzle. This process reduces the fat particles to 1/10 of their original size, and that allows the milk fat to stay suspended in the liquid. All right, so that's getting the milk to stay in the liquid. What about completely removing the milk fat? So removing milk fat fills the demand for variety in milk and cream products. To remove milk fat, milk is processed in a separator. It's a type of centrifuge. So the milk spins at high speeds, causing the lighter milk to collect at the outer wall of the separator. The denser cream collects in the center where it's piped off. So modern cream separators, they can produce a range of milk products, whole milk to a specific amount of fat, low fat, reduced fat, even skim milk, which is no fat at all. So let's talk about those different milk products. So when you have liquid whole milk, what you have there, it contains not less than 3.25% of milk fat. And you'll see that on these packages if you ever look at your labels. They'll tell you how much milk fat. They also have 8.25% milk solids. And then vitamin A and D, those are optional additions. And flavoring, you'll get some flavoring such as hot chocolate a lot of times in a whole milk. All right, so liquid milk that is low fat or reduced fat, and that's milk with some fat removed. And so it's going to contain between 0.5% and 2% milk. So that's your low fat, which is going to be your 0.5%, and your 2% reduced fat milk. And it'll also have 8.25% milk solids, same milk solids as in whole milk. So your low fat milk, as I said, 0.5% or up to 1%. And then your reduced fat is 2%. Now, these must have added vitamin A. And vitamin D, adding vitamin D is optional, but you have to add the vitamin A because you've taken out so much of the fat. And then when you have skim milk or fat-free or non-fat milk, almost all of the fat is removed. So you've got less than that 0.5% of milk fat. And again, not less than 8.25% of milk solids. Again, vitamin A must be added, and the vitamin D is optional, but it's added, again, it's added to most milk these days. Now, further processing of milk, you can have evaporated milk. So that's a canned concentrated milk. It's formed with evaporating about 60% of the water from whole or skim milk. It has a cooked flavor and darker color than regular milk. And condensed whole milk contains at least twice the milk fat and solids. So you're getting 6.5% milk fat instead of 3.25%, and 16.5% of milk solids instead of the 8.25%. Then you have sweetened condensed milk, which is it's whole milk, and it also 60% of its water is removed, and a large quantity of sugar is added. And it's pasteurized. It's usually sold in cans. Sweetened condensed milk is not an acceptable substitute for whole or evaporated milk because of that added sugar. Even though it's the same 60%, you've got all that sugar in there. So you can't just substitute this in your recipe, or it's going to be too sweet. And then we have dry milk powder. So that's milk with nearly all the moisture removed. And powdered milk or dry milk. And it's usually made from skim milk, although whole milk powder is also available. Dry milk can be used to enrich baked goods, or it can be reconstituted in water. They use it for all of that low-fat yogurt that you see. Usually that's reconstituted from powdered milk. Now let's talk about cream. You've got, starting at the thinnest cream, you've got half and half. So that's a mixture of milk and cream, and it contains at least 10.5, but no more than 18% of milk fat. We use it in coffee. Some people use it in cereal. It's often used in baking and as an enrichment to other foods. Then your next step up is light cream, and that's also called coffee cream or table cream. Now, this picks up at the 18% mark and can go up to 30% of milk fat. And again, it's used in baking, it's enrichment for other foods, and the higher you go in cream content, the higher you go in calories. So keep that in mind when deciding whether to use it in coffee or cereal. The next step up is light whipping cream, also just called whipping cream, and that is picks up at the 30% mark and goes up to 36% of milk fat. So a third of it is milk fat. And it can be whipped or used to make sauces, ice cream, and other desserts. And then at the very top of the list, you have heavy whipping cream. That's HWC for the keto carnivore crowds. They always talk about HWC, and people are like, what is that? It's heavy whipping cream. Sometimes it's just called heavy cream. And it contains at least 36% of milk fat. And as you would expect, it whips well, and it's used as a topping for desserts. It's also used for thickening and enriching sauces, other various desserts. Love that heavy whipping cream. Now, let's talk about some other kinds of milk. And I'm not talking about nut and bean milks like almond and soy. Those are not really milk. They call them milk, but they're not really milk. So all female mammals produce milk to feed their young. So it's not surprising that we humans over the years have taken and continue to take milk from a variety of species. People in parts of Africa and the Middle East prize camel milk. Some groups in northern Scandinavia and Russia milk reindeer. It is said that Genghis Khan and the Mongolians conquered vast lands living on meat, blood, and mare's milk. And although cow's milk is the most common today, people in many parts of the world use milk from sheep, water buffalo, and goats. So sheep's milk is higher in fat, 6.5%, and protein is 5.8% content than cows. So the fat to protein, there's actually more fat than there is protein. So people drink sheep's milk. They make yogurt and cheese from it. True Roquefort cheese is made from sheep's milk. Feta is traditionally made with sheep's milk or a mixture of sheep and goat's milk. And then water buffalo milk, that has a high percentage of fat, 7.2%. Remember, again, our cow's milk is 3.25%. And it has a protein count comparable to that of cow's milk. Provolone cheese was first made with water buffalo's milk. And today, Italy prides itself on making the highest quality mozzarella cheese from water buffalo milk. Water buffalo mozzarella. That's good stuff. And then we have goat's milk. Goat's milk, it contains a similar amount of fat and protein as cow's milk, but the smaller fat globules in goat's milk stay suspended, making homogenization necessary. You will not see the cream naturally separate out from goat's milk. Cheese made from goat's milk is referred to chèvre or chèvre, which is the French word for goat, and it's noted for its sharp, tangy flavor. We will not ever be milking our goats, as far as I know. Never say never, but people ask me all the time, you have goats, do you milk your goats? We don't milk our goats. We milk our cows. We use cow's milk. Now, cultured products, fermented dairy products, you can go either way, cultured dairy products or fermented dairy products. So those are the result of adding a starter bacterial culture to fluid dairy products. And under the right temperature conditions, these lactic acid producing bacteria reproduce rapidly. And they cause the milk or the cream to ferment. And the fermentation process gives dairy products a tangy flavor and a thicker consistency. So you got buttermilk, yogurt, sour cream, and crème fraîche. Those are the most common cultured dairy products. Buttermilk. Now, traditionally, buttermilk was a byproduct of the butter making process. Today, people make buttermilk by introducing a starter culture from a specific bacterial strains, and they add it into skim or low-fat milk. And then you hold that milk at a controlled temperature for 12 to 14 hours, and then you have your buttermilk. Buttermilk adds a distinctive tart taste to baked goods and other dishes. Some people enjoy buttermilk as a beverage. Now, another cultured product is yogurt. Some of you have tasted my yogurt. It's really, really good. So yogurt adds a tangy flavor to sauces and other dishes, and it's a low-fat substitute for sour cream. We use it in smoothies. Yogurt's really versatile. Now, it's made by the same process as that for buttermilk, but with a different bacterial strain. So just put a different bacteria in it, you get a different product. And that causes the milk to ferment and coagulate into a custard-like consistency. And some yogurts in the store contain live active bacteria. So medical research shows that yogurt with live active cultures helps the body produce lactase, an enzyme that breaks down lactose. This aids in your digestion, especially in those who have difficulty digesting milk products because of lactose intolerance. And research also suggests that eating yogurt with live active cultures speeds recovery from some forms of intestinal illness. We like to say that it renews the bacteria in your gut, especially after you've had a round of antibiotics. All right, sour cream. Sour cream is made using the same process and the same bacteria as for buttermilk, but it typically uses cream with 18% fat as its base. So sour cream is smooth, thick, and tangy. And then we have Crème Fraîche. Commercial Crème Fraîche is cultured heavy cream that resembles it actually comes out to be a thinner, richer version of sour cream. It's widely available in Europe. If you're using fresh, unpasteurized cream, you're not even putting a starter culture in that. It's going to use its own inherent culture bacteria and enzymes to ferment. So it's widely available in Europe. Now, and Crème Fraîche is expensive in the United States, right? So it's better to make it yourself. And I've got an easy recipe for that. Let's get on to the recipe for Crème Fraîche. Now, you're going to use this anywhere that you would sour cream. Because sour cream has less fat but more protein, simmering or boiling it will result in curdling. So Crème Fraîche is a better choice for sauces or soups. All right, so any recipe that calls for sour cream and it's a sauce or a soup, try your Crème Fraîche there, besides just eating it straight out of the bowl. So as I said, in France, the Crème Fraîche was traditionally made from unpasteurized cream that naturally contained the right bacteria to thicken it. Now, since our cream for the most part is pasteurized here in the U.S., this Crème Fraîche recipe is made by adding a fermenting agent with bacteria to the heavy cream. So you're going to use 2 cups of heavy cream and 3 tablespoons of cultured buttermilk. In a glass jar, combine the buttermilk with the heavy cream. You're going to cover the jar tightly with a cheesecloth or other breathable material. Let it sit at room temperature, 70 to 75 degrees for 24 hours. Then you remove the cloth and you stir. It'll be thick, but it will get thicker. Screw on the lid and refrigerate it for another 24 hours before using it. So it takes 2 days to make this. But it's so easy, right? You're just putting some buttermilk into your heavy cream and then letting that sit room temperature for 24 hours and then refrigerate it for 24 hours. Whew, that was a lot of information about milk and milk products packed into one podcast. You might want to listen to that again and take some notes. Or hop over to peacefulheartfarm.com and click or tap podcast on the menu to read and bookmark the show notes for this show. The homestead is perking along well. I'm so excited about the impending arrival of a newborn calf. Even though she wasn't planned, life is precious to us, and we will welcome this new calf with open arms. We will figure out what to do with her. I'm sure it's going to be a heifer. Okay, I'm not really sure. We don't do ultrasounds to determine sex of our calves, but it's great to say out loud what I want. I want a heifer, heifer, heifer. I hope you'll experiment with brewing up some homemade Crème Fraîche. Remember, don't use ultra-high temperature UHT pasteurized cream. It simply will not produce the product you're looking to create. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, give me a 5-star rating and review. And the best way to help out this show is to share it with any friends or family who might be interested in this type of content. It truly is the absolute best way that you can help me out and help this show out. As always, I'm here to help you taste the traditional touch. Thank you so much for stopping by the homestead, and until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.